Hello and welcome back to another video from the Mike Live in 5 channel. On today's video, we're going to be rating every single Brentford player's season so far. I've been teasing this one for a couple of weeks now, but I finally got around to recording. I'm actually recording this on Friday morning, which is 2 days before our trip to Palace on Sunday. In terms of that one, I am a little bit nervous for it because I mentioned it in my last video, but in terms of the rest of the season for Brentford, we do have easier fixtures in terms of the way that the season has fallen. We play the good teams at home and now we play the poor teams or the lesser teams in the division away. And it starts off with this trip to Palace on Sunday. And if it was a normal trip to Palace or when we played them before during our time in the Premier League, I'd probably be a little bit more confident considering the players that we have. And I know we went there last year and put in a pretty abysmal performance, but we were pretty injury-ridden at that point as well. I think we started with Keane Lewis-Potter and Neal Maupay up top. And Keane Lewis-Potter actually got a really good goal that day, but we kind of just, ever since the goal went in that game specifically, we kind of just faded. But Palace are good. Palace are in good form. I think they've won 5 and drawn 5 in their last 10 games. So it's going to be a tough test, but it would be so big to kind of start the second half of the season off with a really important win. And we're really hoping that we can do that on Sunday. But as you'll see in a minute, today's rating every Brentford player season so far, a proper YouTubey video this. I've got the tier list out. We've got certain categories. I've got every Brentford player that has played a certain amount of minutes this season, but I've also included ones that we've not seen enough of. We're going to take a look at some stats to see if they back up my assessment of each player. But yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. Don't take this too seriously. Please don't get offended in the comments. Before we get going, remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop a comment with your thoughts ahead of the Palace game. Let me know if you agree or disagree with some of my picks in this one. Let's just jump straight into the video. So, as you can see, I've got 5 categories to judge the players on. Premier League Team of the Season, High Performers, Decent, shout out Joe Hart, Need to See More, and Not Seen Enough. The Not Seen Enough category is going to be strictly reserved for players who I don't think we've seen enough to make a judgment on this season, be that injuries, playing time, etc. There's going to be a few that I think are going to be in the top category, a lot in the high performance, some in the decent, and the Need to See More, I think, may cause the most disagreements in the comment section. But yeah, I've got all the players here. Let's just jump straight into it. First player, I've got Josh Dasilva. I actually tweeted something about Josh Dasilva the other day because I posted a clip from my last YouTube video on socials, and someone mentioned in the comments Josh Dasilva, and it's just another one of those Brentford players who's kind of just been lost in the ether. Obviously had that big injury, back-to-back injuries basically ever since we've been in the Premier League, and it's looking unlikely that we're going to see him this season after that ACL tear in training. But it just kind of, someone mentioned it and I was like, wow, I miss him so much, because I do think with Josh Dasilva, it was one of those where when we came up from the Championship, I know he had a bit of a spell out on the sidelines in the promotion winning season towards the back end of it. But in that season, even though Ivan Toney bagged 30 plus goals, I actually thought, and the season before as well, and Clayton actually said something about this on the podcast when he used to come on a fair bit. But he said that he was telling his mates, sort of when we came up to the Prem, people were asking him, who should we be looking for? And it was Josh Dasilva. I think in terms of playing that 10 role, even an 8 role, and being defensively solid, but just so good going forward. Like, he's another one. We're going to talk about Mikkel Damsgaard in this video, but his 1v1 ability, especially in those Championship days, he would just get away from players so effortlessly. And we all know about that trademark left-footed strike, top bins every single time, straight cash money with Josh Dasilva when he gets on that left foot and sticks it in the far corner. I pray that we see some of that in the Premier League. We've already had glimmers. I remember Leicester away, that was a good one. Nottingham Forest at home a couple of seasons ago when he scores in the last minute. But again, it's one of those, he's never had a sustained run in the team, never had a sustained run in the Premier League where he's not been hit with a big injury. And nothing would give me more happiness than to see Josh Dasilva in the Premier League with Brentford. But I don't know. Let me know in the comments, because it's kind of one of those where he's had so many injuries now. I don't want to say it, but will he come back the same? Will we see him again? I'm not sure. And that really, really makes me, it just gives me a lot of pain, to be honest, because he was just so bloody good. But yeah, Josh Dasilva for me, going in the not seen enough category, because we've not seen him this season at all. Next one, Keane Lewis-Potter. This is an interesting one, because obviously everyone knows the story about Keane Lewis-Potter. Signed as a left wing, took a little bit of time to bed in, and then due to the injury crisis that we've got, well, the injury crisis last season, I wouldn't call it a massive crisis this season. It's a crisis in the fullback areas, that's for sure. But Keane Lewis-Potter, for me, has been one of the standout performers for Brentford this season, doing a shift at left-back in the way that he does, kind of taken to that role so effortlessly, improving his defending, improving his 1v1 ability in those defensive third situations. When you look at Keane Lewis-Potter's stats, I think I did this right at the start of the season, and he was really, really high in these defensive metrics in terms of tackles, interceptions, blocks, clearances, and aerials won, but not so high in the attacking ones. And I think that's because, so the way FBref do their stats, right, is they compare players in similar positions. So I think when I pulled up a stat pack on KLP right at the start of the season, it would have been in that left wing position, which is why he was so high in terms of attacking players, but in defensive metrics. I think now, because he's really consolidated that position as a left back in the team, you're starting to see his attacking stats really shine, as opposed to his defensive stats, which have kind of gone down a little bit, which is expected, right? Because he's a left wing playing at left back, so his defensive stats aren't going to compare with other left backs in the league, but his attacking stats will. And I think that's what you've seen since he's done that. 90th percentile for progressive carries, 3.15 per 90. Successful take-ons, he's very high. Touches in the attacking penalty area, 95th percentile. And progressive passes received, 84th percentile. As well, he's got quite high non-penalty XG, shots, non-penalty goals. The only thing I would say about these shots is that he really needs to improve his final product in those situations when he gets into areas when he can shoot. Because a lot of the time, and I've said it so many times, and Brentford fans will know, he gets into these positions and it's a P-roller. He gets into these positions, it's straight at the keeper. He's never finding the corners. And to find the form that he found at Hull when he was in the Championship Team of the Season, and he was Hull's Player of the Season, and he was getting a lot of praise, he needs to improve those moments when he's in front of goal, or when he gets into positions from left back and you expect the net to bulge and it doesn't. The one that I want to do shout out is the one against Southampton, but even in that game he had one that he should have buried. But yeah, I like the fact that his attacking stats have gone up. The fact that his defensive stats have gone down isn't a surprise, because he's a left wing playing at left back, and to be honest, these don't really paint the full picture for me. Like, I'm not looking at games and thinking, bar maybe the game against Forest at home and he made that big mistake, but I'm not looking at games and thinking, oh my god, they're targeting Keane Lewis-Potter down the left-hand side. I'm never thinking that. So in terms of that, I'm happy with Keane Lewis-Potter, and I would actually put him in the high performers. I'm not going to go Premier League team this season, because I know there's three very obvious candidates for that. And we're going to talk about this guy next, Bryan Mbeumo, this season. Still massively overperforming his XG, which I think is just mental. So much noise about where he's going to end up, and I spoke about it on a couple of videos ago, I think. I don't think it'll be in January. Thomas Frank's been very frank about his assessment of the transfer window and about letting key players go. Yoane Wissa and Bryan Mbeumo being two of those. Kevin Schade, I'm going to talk about in a bit. But Bryan Mbeumo, I've spoken about him a lot. Everyone's spoken about him a lot. I think in terms of right wingers in the Premier League, I think he's kind of top 3, top 5 kind of material, to be honest. When he's on it, what I will say is when he's on it, unplayable. Unplayable. When he's not on it, he drifts a little bit too much for me. And that's a worry that I have for him when he makes that jump into a top 6 club. And I know it would be interesting to kind of see the reception he gets from fans when he has those games. And it's difficult to kind of say that he will have those games, because he's going to be playing in better teams with better players around him. Whether he can rise to that, I think he can. I think when he's on it, Champions League player, 110%. But this season, I think he's a moments player, right? He steps up in those games when you need a goal. I'm thinking about the Ipswich game. I'm thinking about the Southampton game when he was our talisman. I'm thinking this guy, he really has those big moments that kind of define his season so far. 13 goals, 4 assists for him. I think stepping into the shoes of Ivan Toney and becoming that main man in our team. I think him and Wissa have kind of shared it a little bit, but Bryan Mbeumo more so, because Yoane Wissa was one where he hadn't quite had that impact that Bryan Mbeumo had been having with Ivan Toney in the team. Wissa would often start on the bench, or he'd be starting on the left wing, and it wouldn't quite work for Wissa. But Bryan Mbeumo and Ivan Toney had that synchrony, and they were as important as each other in that season where we almost got to Europe right at the end. So I'm so happy with Bryan Mbeumo, and I don't think it's a stretch to even put him in a Premier League team of the season so far. I think a lot of people, non-Brentford fans, would say that he's been a top 3, top 5 winger in the league. And that big money move is going to come, and I just hope we can squeeze as much cash out as possible from that transfer as we can. But yeah, Bryan Mbeumo, unbelievable player. Next one, Yoane Wissa. I want to talk about Yoane Wissa. I want to talk about some of his stats quickly, because I've been really impressed with how Yoane Wissa has kind of taken on that Tony role. I've spoken when I was talking about Bryan in terms of him stepping into that talismanic role, in that the player that carries the team forward. But what I've liked about Yoane Wissa is his versatility, and that he's shown this season in abundance the ability to spin in behind and the ability to come deep and link play. And I think what illustrates that is his progressive carries this season, which is in the 76th percentile for players in Yoane Wissa's position, 1.85. But I think that shows that he likes to come deep a lot, get the ball off centre halves, like I showed in a clip when he did against Southampton, and then progress the ball up the pitch. I think he's so good at that kind of coming deep, selling a defender or selling a midfielder, dropping the shoulder, turning, and then setting us off on an attack. And I've loved to see the variation in his game, because when Bryan Mbeumo and Mikkel Damsgaard get on the ball, he's always looking to spin in the behind if they've got a bit of space in midfield. And I think you saw that against Everton, you saw that against Ipswich, you saw it against Southampton. He's always looking for that run. When Mikkel Damsgaard gets his head up, or when Bryan Mbeumo cuts in from the right, he's always looking to spin in behind. And I've loved to see that kind of versatility in his play this season, especially from someone who we were kind of... I mean, we said it on the podcast, we wouldn't even have been too angry, I think, if we'd have got a big fee from him to go over the summer. But like, with hindsight now, it would have been a terrible decision, because he scored 11 goals this season, arguably been our player of the season so far, him and Bryan Mbeumo and Mikkel Damsgaard. And if we'd have let him go, our 40 odd goals that we've scored this season would have taken a big hit. Some of his other stats as well. I think just looking at his non-penalty goals per 90, 96th percentile, I don't think his goal per 90 ratio is actually bested by a lot of players in the Premier League so far this season. Non-penalty XG is very high. He has just, I think, surprised a lot of people to be able to kind of go from what he was, in that we didn't really know if he was better as a winger or a striker, but then Ivan Toney left and now he's the 9 in the team. You kind of, I wasn't expecting it from Yoane Wissa. And even if you look at the players like that he's being compared to on FB Ref, Lautaro Martinez, Robert Lewandowski, Jonathan David, Jackson at Chelsea, Alvarez at Atletico, you know, he's in good company in terms of similar players to how he's been playing. And to be able to score 11 goals, the same with Bryan, to be able to score 11 and 13 goals in the Premier League. And really, I think without their goals, we would be in a little bit of trouble. We're always looking to them. They're mainstays in the fantasy team, first of all, but we're always looking to them for a little bit of magic. And it's almost like, especially at home this season, we know that one of them is going to get on the score sheet. I will address the transfer rumours to Forest. I thought that bid was fucking ridiculous, if I'm honest. 22 million. I think they're probably feeling a bit hard done by the whole Brennan Johnson bidding transfer saga whenever that happened a couple of seasons ago. But Wissa is one where I think that we have now got Thiago in. Granted, we haven't seen him at all this season, really. I do think Wissa might be one that the club might try to move on. I think they've been clear in that they don't want to let Schade, Bryan Mbeumo and Yoane Wissa go in January. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw no contract extension for Yoane Wissa. The Forest links are just weird, though. I think that, like, to go into Forest and probably be second fiddle to Chris Wood, who I think's just signed a new contract at Forest, is a bit strange for me. He's not really going to play on the wing. We know that he's better as a 9. He's not probably going to displace Elanga or Hudson-Odoi, because they've been in great form this season. So the Forest one, whether they look to build in the summer transfer window, if they finish in the Champions League spots, they're going to have to. And that might be a good signing for them in terms of being able to rotate in the league and the cups. But I think Yoane Wissa this season has been electric. It doesn't matter the defenders, the level of opposition he's up against, he's always at it. I would say probably a stronger presence in the team at times than Bryan Mbeumo, in that I don't think Wissa can really, or his games where he fades aren't as blatant as the games where Bryan fades. And for that reason, I do think he deserves to be up there in the Premier League team of the season shout. If I'm going to put Bryan in there, I have to put Wissa in there. They almost come as a 2. So yeah, Yoane Wissa, Premier League team of the season for me. And just to clarify, I'm not putting them in the Premier League team of the season. I'm saying they would be contenders to be in it. Kevin Schade. Kevin Schade I don't want to spend too much time on, because I think I've spoken about him a lot on this channel. I want to see more from him. I think he's got all of the attributes to be a massive, massive player for Brentford in the future. Whether that happens, I think I'll touch on now, because whether that happens, we don't know. There's been links to Borussia Dortmund in this transfer window. Again, I don't think we're going to let him go in January, but we had a conversation on the podcast about what the minimum we would take for Kevin Schade would be. And it sounds like Dortmund are very, very interested in. Whether I know that the club will want to keep him to kind of maximise his potential and sell him on for more whenever we got the opportunity to do so. But if he doesn't kick on this season, and I'm talking about kicking on in a way where he's a consistent starter in the team and he's nailed down that left wing position for when we play against, well, we're gonna have opportunities to see him in that left wing position more often because we've got easier games, so to speak, for the rest of the season. He needs to nail down that position for me, and he needs to start putting up some numbers in terms of sharing that burden with Bryan Mbeumo and Yoane Wissa for the rest of the season. His goals per 90 rate is in the 93rd percentile in the league. His non-penalty XG is in the 90th percentile in the league. Look at the aerials, 99th percentile in the league. Like, he has got all of the raw attributes to be an amazing player for us, and his goal rate and his ability to get into these chances where he has an opportunity to score is remarkable. I want to see Kevin Schade maximise his potential. Whether that's here or at Dortmund, I don't know. But I wouldn't be too bothered, is that the right word? It sounds a bit blasé, but I wouldn't be too annoyed if Kevin Schade doesn't kick on for the rest of the season and then Borussia Dortmund say, hey, we'll give you 50 million for him. And we say, okay, well, we only paid 22 million for this guy, so we're doubling our profit in one transfer. And he's been at the club for 3 seasons now and hasn't quite... I mean, it's taken Keane Lewis-Potter and Mikkel Damsgaard a similar time, but I think we've seen glimpses. And I'm not saying we haven't seen glimpses of Schade, but I feel like at this point in Keane Lewis-Potter, Nathan Collins and Mikkel Damsgaard evolution as Brentford players, we had started to see consistent performances. And whilst we've seen glimpses from Kevin Schade, we haven't seen that consistency just yet. I want to see it in the rest of the season. I do think if that doesn't happen, and Borussia Dortmund is still keen in the summer, I don't think the club would be opposed to getting a nice bit of profit to reinvest in that position. But yeah, Kevin Schade for me in the tier list. You might disagree with this one. I'm going with need to see more because I think, bar the Leicester game, I don't think we've seen enough. Paris Maghoma, interesting one, because we have started to see Paris Maghoma get integrated into the first team more this season. I think he had a big injury with Bolton last year in pre-season, which basically kept him out of the first half. But we have started to see him appear on the bench. We've started to see him come off the bench and make somewhat of an impact in games. I remember his debut against Aston Villa when he came on, and he was kind of playing that kind of deep-lying midfield role, which was weird for me to see, first of all, because Fabio Carvalho, another player that I'm going to talk about in this video, didn't come on in that game. And in place of him, Maghoma came on first after a lengthy injury spell out. And it was one where I was looking at it and I was thinking, didn't he play a little bit higher up for Bolton last season? I think when he came on against Southampton away, he was definitely in a more advanced position. And I've got a lot of hopes for Paris Maghoma from listening or hearing Bolton fans talk about him last season. I think he, specifically in attacking positions, but also his ability to dictate and control games in midfield, I think was really, really promising. And I do think 100% one for the future. Whether he breaks into the first team for the rest of the season, I'm not sure, because I think we've kind of got seasoned midfielders in those positions at the moment in Jensen, Damsgaard, Janelt, Norgaard, Yarmo, who's a little bit further ahead in his development than Paris Maghoma is. But I'm very excited for this guy for the rest of his Brentford career. I think once the likes of Norgaard, Janelt, Jensen start to move on or start to come towards the end of their contracts, or we're thinking about the kind of future and what keeps us in the Premier League and helps us thrive in the Premier League going forward, I do think the likes of Yehor Yarmoliuk, Paris Maghoma, Fabio Carvalho are all going to come to the fold. So I'm really excited about Paris Maghoma, but again, I don't think I've seen enough from him because of the injuries, because of, he's only just broken into the team. So I'm putting him in the not seen enough / injured category. And then we're going to move on to Vitaly Janelt. I don't want to spend too long on Vitaly Janelt because I think everyone knows my thoughts on him as a player. Amazing, fantastic squad player. So versatile, can play at left back, can do a shift in the 6, in the 8. The only thing I would say about Vitaly Janelt, and I think everyone knows this, I don't think he offers enough in promising attacking situations. I want to stress that because I think maybe I was a little bit unclear in my assessment of Janelt in the last video, and I said that he gives the ball away too much, but I'm not sure if it's that. I don't think he gives the ball away too much. I think he gives the ball away in attacking situations, in the attacking phase of play. I think that's where he struggles a little bit with the pace of how we want to break this season. And again, I've mentioned his passing range. I don't think that's quite up to the levels of a Jensen or a Norgaard. But yeah, I don't want to spend too long on Vitaly Janelt. What I'm going to say is he's in the decent category for me. I don't think he's been enough to be in the high performers chart this season. If you'd have asked me last season when he was like an ever-present in the team, I would say he'd definitely be in the high performers. But this season, I think we're starting to kind of see maybe what our midfield would look like next season. And I think in terms of that optimum midfield three, I've spoken about it a lot over the last couple of weeks. I don't think Vitaly Janelt needs to be in it. Again, the same with Yehor Yarmoliuk. I think I've spoken about him quite a lot in the last couple of weeks. And another one that's similar to Paris Maghoma in that he's going to be one for the future for sure. I think I've seen enough from him this season to suggest that he is good enough to play at this level. And someone pointed out in the comments to me in the last video, he's only 20 years old. And I completely forgot to mention that. He's 20 years old. And to be only 20 years old and to have kind of gotten or gained the trust of Thomas Frank in a way that other midfielders haven't yet, I think is really, really interesting. The fact that Thomas Frank trusts him, the fact that he's not looked out of place against really high-level opposition, he, I think, has the mentality and the attributes to be a really, really top-class midfielder. But again, he's not going to be one that's in the team week in, week out this season. I think it's the same story. Once we see the likes of Janelt and Norgaard and Jensen kind of come to the twilight of their careers at Brentford, that's when we'll start to see the likes of Yehor Yarmoliuk a little bit more. But I've been really, really impressed with him. I think the standout games for me were the Aston Villa game in the second half and the Newcastle game at home when he did not look out of sorts whatsoever against really high-quality opposition. The technical ability's there, the creativity's there. I think a silky footballer. He's kind of got that Thiago Alcantara kind of swag about him on the pitch. You see with the hand up and the way he Cruyff turns and the way he brings the ball down. He's just silky. I like it. I like it a lot. One for the future for sure. Whether we see him playing in that 6 role when Norgaard maybe moves on, I don't know. To be honest, I think he's more suited to an 8 role because I think he's got more going forward. But I do think he's got that defensive side of his game as well. For me, I'm sticking Yehor Yarmoliuk in decent. I'm not putting him in high performers because of the couple of really good games that he's had. But for me, he's been very solid this season. And again, he's 20 years old. He's 20. So one for the future for sure. Emre Konak. I think Emre could benefit from a loan. I think we saw him at the start of the season come on in games. And when he joined from the Turkish league, there were people saying that he was kind of the best Turkish talent to come out of the league ever. To be playing in that league when he was so young, and he's still so young now, but to be playing in that league from a really young age, I think is really impressive in and of itself. To come to the Premier League, obviously it's a big jump up, and we've not really seen him have a sustained spell in the team. I think in the cup games this season and last season, he's been good. He's looked busy. He looks similar to Janelt in the way that he plays, kind of all-action midfielder. But in terms of where he is, in terms of our midfielders, we've got Janelt, Yarmo, Norgaard, Jensen, Paris Maghoma, Mikkel Damsgaard. We've got all of these midfielders, and he's probably at the bottom of that pecking order. So I think he would benefit from a Championship loan or a lower Premier League loan. I think that would be good for him. But again, I'm just going to put him into the not seen enough category. For me, Christian Norgaard. Oh, I really want to put him in Premier League team this season. I really, really want to. But I think you need to... The category in and of itself is kind of flawed in a way, because if you're a player in attacking positions like the likes of Mikkel Damsgaard, Bryan Mbeumo and Yoane Wissa, you're going to get a lot more of the headlines than someone like Christian Norgaard who does that dirty work from other clubs, from people that don't watch Brentford week in, week out. And I think Yoane Wissa, Bryan Mbeumo and Mikkel Damsgaard are starting to get that recognition. But Christian Norgaard will never do that because he does the dirty work. He doesn't do the goals. He doesn't do the assists. He pops up with goals, really important ones, like the ones against Man City. But he's not in the headlines as much as the likes of Bryan Mbeumo and Yoane Wissa. There's been a lot of doubters this season about Christian Norgaard. I remember I can't remember the game, but there was a particularly bad performance, and I think it was at home when he gave the ball away. He just looked a bit off the pace. And listen, the geezer's made of glass, right? He can't do more than 2 games in a week, which I think he's 30 years old now. He's played a lot of games for Brentford through the Championship into the Premier League. But what I said in my last video is that in our best midfield, Christian Norgaard has to be in there. He just provides something different that none of our other midfielders do. And if you take a look at his stats, they completely back this up. Look at these defensive stats. Tackles, 84th percentile, 99th percentile for interceptions in Europe's Big 5 leagues. 89th percentile for blocks, clearances, aerials 1. This guy is that midfield enforcer. He's the epitome of a midfield enforcer. Nothing or not much goes through him. And I think he's so pivotal to defending against attacks, to starting attacks from the back. He is that midfield boss. And I cannot stress how important he is to the team. And to everyone that was doubting Norgaard, and I'm going to say I told you so because I said it on the podcast, he never has he never has a sustained period in the team where he's bad for too long. He will only be one off game or two off games. He will never be consistently poor for 3 or 4 weeks. And this guy, I think, has just been immeasurably important to Brentford this season. And he will be important to Brentford for the rest of the season. Whether the club have thoughts of maybe moving him on in the summer, I'm not sure. I know he's coming to the end of his contract and he wants a new one. But I'm not sure whether we give him that because of his age and because of that injury record and because he might not have the capabilities to play a couple of games week in, week out, especially if we get into Europe. I think if we get into Europe, the incentive to actually have him in those important games goes up. But if we don't, I'm not sure the club will be looking to extend that to the extent that he wants. But yeah, for me, Norgaard goes straight into high performance. I don't think he goes into the Premier League team, the season contender, because, you know, he doesn't do the goals. He doesn't do the assists. He does all the stuff that I just mentioned, the tackles, the blocks, the interceptions. He's everywhere. I love the man. He's our captain, 100% captain material as well. People questioning his credentials in terms of being that leader on the pitch, you know, give your head a wobble. I think in terms of a natural leader and someone that leads by example, a little bit like Harry Kane in that manner, he leads through his actions on the pitch rather than, you know, galvanising the team in a kind of Pontus style. I do think we need a Pontus. I think we've lacked that kind of vocal leader on the pitch, maybe someone to really kind of get that belief going and maintain that belief going into the final spells of games. I think of the games sort of, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but I think of the games where we've conceded late against Fulham, against Liverpool. I think if we had a Pontus in the team, I don't think we maybe concede those goals. But yeah, anyway, Pontus, I still love you, by the way. Come on the podcast whenever you want. But yeah, Christian Norgaard goes into high performers for me. Mathias Jensen, this is tricky because, again, another one, I think I might have to put him into not seen enough because I just don't think he's played enough minutes this season, which is weird because there's been there's a bit of a Jensen dichotomy amongst Brentford fans, I think. I remember after the Plymouth game at home, everyone was saying, you know, this guy was shite. He was terrible. And I think everyone was that day. But again, you know, I don't want to talk about it too much because I've spoken about the changes into the team and what I thought about those changes. But, you know, I think I saw some people on X or Twitter saying he's only had one good season and, you know, he's off it. I don't think that is the case. I think he had that season when we were pushing for Europe and he was incredible, like one of our top performers that season. And then he kind of had a bit of a drop-off last season, but I don't think he was poor by any stretch of the imagination. Again, in terms of that silky midfielder, similar to Yarmo, I think they're very similar players. I think Jensen obviously has a better passing range. He can put it on a sixpence for the likes of Kevin Schade and for Bryan Mbeumo and Yoane Wissa to run onto. But I don't know. We're just not seeing enough of him this season. So I think I might have to just stick with that. We know the quality's there. We know what he's got in terms of that passing range, in terms of that ability to stay calm, in terms of that ability to be the kind of quarterback of the team. We know that he can do all those things, but the injury record this season hasn't been great. And for that reason, I'm going to have to put him in not seen enough. Sepp van den Berg. This is a difficult one for me because I don't think Brentford fans, the rest of us on the podcast, have quite sort of appreciated how seamlessly Sepp van den Berg is taken to playing regular Premier League football. I know he played in the Bundesliga for a while and probably you could say maybe the most similar league in terms of Europe's big five leagues. But Sepp van den Berg, from when he came in, I think was initially meant to be cover and to push the likes of Nathan Collins and Ethan Pinnock in that central defensive position. But for him to be pushed out to right back to accommodate the injuries that we've got in terms of Aaron Hickey and Rico Henry being out for so long, and for him to never look out of sorts defensively, I think the only game where he was maybe exposed was United away, where Garnacho just targeted him and gave him a rotten afternoon. But, you know, he hasn't sort of looked defensively weak, I would say, at any point during the season. When he's played centre-half with Collins in recent weeks, I actually think that might be the start of a very, very nice partnership going forward, with Ethan Pinnock maybe slowing down this season. But I do think maybe kind of underappreciated in a way by Brentford fans, including myself, because I've not really raved about him that much. But I think his 1v1 defensive ability is really impressive. I think his aerial presence is good. He's got all of the raw attributes for a centre-back. He's calm on the ball as well. I like the way Sepp van den Berg has taken to this Brentford team, and he's done a shift in whatever position Thomas Frank has told him to do. So for that reason, I think I'm going to put Sepp van den Berg in high performers. Am I? I don't know. I think he's been good. I think I might go for decent, actually. Let me know in the comments whether you agree with that, because I think quietly Sepp van den Berg has been one of the high performers, but I don't think he's been at the level of a Nathan Collins, who I'll speak about next, actually. I would actually say I'm going to put Nathan Collins in Premier League Team of the Season candidate so far, and he will not get the plaudits in terms of the centre-halves that are going to be in that Team of the Season come the end of the campaign. He won't get the same recognition as the likes of William Saliba or Gabriel, or the two centre-halves at Forest in Murillo and Milenkovic. He won't get that credit because Brentford haven't kept that many clean sheets this season. But I think I've spoken about it enough on the podcast and on this channel. It's kind of weird that I would probably consider Nathan Collins to be our best defender this season and one of our players of the season, even though we've struggled to keep clean sheets. I don't know if that affects the Sepp van den Berg, but just quickly to have a look at Nathan Collins' stats this season. In terms of his attacking presence going forward is very high compared with players who play at centre-half. But his blocks, I think that's been the standout for me this season. 94th percentile, 1.94 per 90 blocks. He just gets in the way of bloody everything. Honestly, like sometimes when we've been last-ditch defending, which has been the case in a lot of games where we're kind of backed against the wall, you can always kind of rely on Nathan Collins to be absolutely throwing himself around like a ragdoll in the 6-yard area, because he has done. And to be in the 94th percentile for this metrics is really, really impressive. But the thing for me that stands out with Nathan Collins is he is kind of... Last season, we saw Nathan Collins in a light where every time he would play, you would almost be expecting a mistake. We all remember that game against Wolves where where he kind of forgot the team he was playing for, the team that he'd signed for in the summer, and he just decided to gift them a few goals that day, which was quite weird. But there were other performances like Chelsea away where it was like fucking watching Beckenbauer at the back. He was ridiculous. The way he'd go on these marauding runs, the way he'd tidy it up at the back, how calm he was on the ball, the aerial presence that he had in containing their strike force up top. And I think for that reason, more than his stats, more than his blocks and the interceptions and the tackles, I think for that reason to go, and I think that's going to be a theme, especially when we talk about Mikkel Damsgaard as well, to go from where he was, and I think Craig put it perfectly on the podcast once, he's either really, really good or he's really, really shit. And to go from that to now being really, really good every single week, I think is really impressive. And I do think, in terms of that Premier League Player of the Season candidate in that position, I don't think there's been a better or a larger improvement this season than Nathan Collins in the Premier League. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I'm going to put him in Premier League Team of the Season candidate. And I know that might be a little bit biased, but I think he's been really, really good this season, and I couldn't be happier for him. We'll move on to another centre-half. This is tough. Ethan Pinnock. I think Ethan Pinnock, for me, I think he goes into need to see more. That might be harsh. That might be really harsh. Let me know in the comment section. He had there's been signs of him slowing down, and I think that might be a little bit harsh because I don't think it's sustained. It's in a similar way to Norgaard. I don't think he's been bad for consistent weeks. There's been performances where I've thought, oh God, he looks a little bit off it this season. And he has been run ragged by certain players. But again, in other games, he's completely dominated. The Wolves game for me, even though we conceded 3 goals, the way he contained Strand Larsen and Cunha, I thought was really, really impressive for two players that have been really, really high in terms of scoring and assisting this season. But I don't know. I think he might have lost a yard. it's really difficult. It's really difficult with Ethan Pinnock because he is getting a little bit older now, and he's never been a player where you think, wow, he's got amazing pace, but for somehow just his build, and he's kind of really lanky and his big strides, you almost kind of felt like even if he was up against the quickest or paciest attacker in the league, he wouldn't really have a problem. But I think the one that sticks out for me isn't actually from this season. It was against Newcastle at home on the last day of the season last season. And Alexander Isak can do this to every centre-half in the league, by the way, but Alexander Isak just ran him ragged. Like, he did not know how to contain him. Similar situation for Leicester's goal against us in the 4-1 win this season when Jamie Vardy kind of just eased him off the ball, showed like a similar amount of pace, and Jamie Vardy's like 37 now. So I don't know if I'm being harsh with this one. It pains me to say it because I think potentially going forward, I actually think the partnership for Brentford next season might be Nathan Collins and Sepp Berg over Nathan Collins and Ethan Pinnock. Let me know what you think in the comment section, because I don't know if I've seen enough bad performances to maybe I might put him in decent, but I think that might be generous. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section, because this is a fun video, but I'm always kind of umming and ahhing about the decisions that I've made. Rico Henry. We saw him very briefly against Plymouth when he started in the Cup. We saw him come on against Man City in the 2-2 game. I absolutely adore Rico Henry. I really, really adore Rico Henry. Again, I'm just going to have to put him into not seen enough, though, because obviously he's been out for the whole season. I really, really hope that he gets back to the levels that we've seen. But I think, it's another one where, with the players that we've talked about and these big injuries, I'm thinking about Josh Dasilva and Aaron Hickey in particular. It's the second time Rico Henry's torn his ACL. Obviously different knees, which is worth noting. But I don't know. I've just got a bad feeling about him coming back. I'm not sure. I just think one more big injury for Rico Henry, and I don't think he's going to have the career that he deserves. I think that might be a bit harsh to say, but I think it's just the reality. The Premier League is just getting so much faster, so much more physical, and the games are coming thick and fast as well in terms of cover in that position. We've got Michael Kayode, who's not been announced yet at the time of recording, coming in. Aaron Hickey, who we've just extended his contract. I don't know if Rico Henry is going to be able to kind of come back and not have lengthy spells on the touchline, and that really pains me to say that, because I think Rico Henry arguably has been one of our best ever players at Brentford. Genuinely, I think he's been that good. I really, really hope he gets back to the Rico Henry that we know and love, and we hope to see more of him come the rest of the season. But yeah, I'm going to have to put him into not seen enough. Igor Thiago, same story. I think this guy's going to be so important for us this season. I mentioned it in my last video, but he is just, when we signed him all that time ago in February last year, we knew that he was going to come. The Ivan Toney replacement, £30 million, our record signing, and he's just not played. He's just had injuries. Got injured in the pre-season game against Wimbledon after scoring a couple of nice goals. We saw him make his debut against Everton away. We then saw him start against Newcastle at home, and he looked a real handful, like neutralised Fabian Schade and Dan Burns' aerial presence, and allowed the likes of Carvalho and Wissa and Mbeumo to get more involved in attacking phases. I think he's going to be really, 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 really important for Brentford this season. But again, I've not seen enough to make like a full-on assessment of him. I think he's played about 150 minutes or something like that this season, and we've just not seen enough of him. But I do think he's going to be really important for Brentford. Mads Roerslev, I won't spend too long on him because I've talked about him way too much in the last couple of weeks. I'm putting him into the decent category. I think his turnaround in form, poor up until Christmas, very, very poor up until Christmas. And like I've said a lot of times on the podcast, on this channel, not what we need going forward in terms of a first choice fullback at the club, but always available, always ready to do a shift. And I think his turnaround in recent weeks has been enough to put him in this decent category. That's the rest I'm going to say on Mads Roerslev. Jayden Maghoma, obviously gone on loan to Preston now, which I think is going to be really good for his development. This was a deadline day transfer in the summer, and he hadn't, and I think Dan kind of expressed his reservations about it on the podcast. He hadn't played any minutes for Southampton in the Premier League, and we were kind of, obviously one for the future, and he's so young, and that loan at Preston is going to be so beneficial to his career. But he's obviously one that they think it might be the one to take over from Rico Henry when he slows down, or is slowing down right now. But again, not seen enough of him to make a judgment on him. He looks like he's, again, one of those who's got the raw attributes to succeed. Just needs to refine the defensive aspect of his game. It looks a little bit erratic in the games where he's played this season in the Cup. But I think he's going to be one for the future. So in terms of having that competition for Rico Henry, and look, Mikkel Damsgaard is going to provide that kind of competition in those fullback areas, because I think he can play off the left and the right. If you want me to do like a full... on and off topic, if you want me to do like a full player breakdown of Mikkel Damsgaard, let me know in the comment section below. I might see if I can get some sort of Italian football journalist on to kind of talk about his strengths and his weaknesses and how he's going to fit into this Brentford team. But in terms of having those, or having that competition in the fullback areas, Jayden Maghoma, Aaron Hickey, Rico Henry, they're all going to be there. Mikkel Damsgaard, Mads Roerslev, if he doesn't go to Wolfsburg like it's been rumoured, they're all going to be there to provide that competition, and that's only a good thing. And Jayden Maghoma, I think, will be a part of that in the next season / the season after, but one for the future. Aaron Hickey, fucking hell, there's so many on this not seen enough list. Where is Aaron Hickey? Where is Aaron Hickey? We've extended his contract, which I actually think is a really smart move. And it's been a really, really, just on a slightly tangent, it's been a really good transfer window for Brentford so far. We've not... Coyote hasn't been announced. He's having medical tests, which scares me, because Brentford and medicals, they don't really, they don't work sometimes, which is great. But it's quietly been a very good January transfer window. Contract extension for Mikkel Damsgaard, who I'm going to talk about soon, and Aaron Hickey, I think is really, really positive, and I think it's really smart to kind of tie him down, because it wasn't long ago that there were links to Manchester City for Aaron Hickey, and obviously he's had these two massive injury setbacks, but he said in his contract extension interview that the club released that he was going to be back on the grass soon and training with the team in the next few weeks. So it might be one where we see Aaron Hickey before the end of the season, and if we're in a position where we're kind of looking like we could potentially sneak into one of those European spots, having him back is going to be a huge boost. So Aaron Hickey, be great to see him back in the Brentford team for the rest of the season. We'll move on to Kristoffer Ajer. I'm getting a little bit sick of this injury record from Kristoffer Ajer. Looking at transfer market, he's made 71 appearances for Brentford since we signed him in 2021. The thing that frustrates me about these kinds of signings, and I think Celtic fans were saying a similar thing when we signed him, is that his injury record is really, really bad. And you think about why we didn't sign Antonio Nusa. You think about, I think, Jens Kajusta as well, who's at Ipswich now. You think about injury concerns over some players that we've considered bringing to the club and then gone back on that decision because we've looked at their injury record. I just think for the quality of player that Kristoffer Ajer is, be that at centre-half and at right-back, for him to be now almost 4 years into his Brentford career, we need to have seen more game time from him. I'm not sure. I think he signed a 5-year deal when he came through from Celtic, and to only have played 71 times, and not all of those games have been from the start as well, I think is a little bit worrying. But what I will say about Chris Ajer is that when he has played, I think right back or centre half, he's looked really, really good. He's got great pace for someone that's so big. He's got great feet for someone that's so big as well. I think about the Tottenham game away this season, and I thought, down that right-hand side, he offered a lot of threat and a lot of interplay with Bryan Mbeumo, which is weird because I think when you think about the player that should offer more interplay and better exchanges with Bryan Mbeumo and to really open up those passing lanes down the right-hand side, you think of someone more like Mads Roerslev in terms of that build and being a little bit more agile. But Kristoffer Ajer, I've said it so many times in this video, but Ajer has like all the raw attributes to be amazing. He's tall, he's quick, he's strong, he's got good feet. For a centre-half, that's the position that we signed him in. I think he's taken to that right-back role like a duck to water. But I'm going to have to put him in the not seen enough category. It's really fucking piling up. Bloody hell. Add another one to it. I'm just going to skip Chris Ajer for now and go straight to Gustavo Nunes. he's going to play a big role in the team, and I think might be a factor in whether we decide to sell Kevin Schade or not. I don't even think Gustavo Nunes is on the grass yet, which is insane. Another one that we signed in the summer who hasn't made a senior appearance, or who hasn't made an appearance for the club yet. And it's just another, add it to the list of where are they at Brentford. They're just they don't exist. There was so much excitement around him when he signed. I remember listening to a podcast who were saying it was a real coup for Brentford. There are a lot of Premier League clubs sniffing around like a young Brazilian talent to come out of their domestic league. There's so much that comes with that kind of transfer, in that he's Brazilian. You know, he comes from that league, and it's built on flair. It's built on attacking kind of individuality. And I listened to that podcast, and they said like the way that he exploded onto the scene at Gremio was like not something that they see a lot in that league. And I'm really excited for what he can bring for Brentford going forward. But you know, whether we see him this season, I don't know. Mikkel Damsgaard, the king. The absolute king. I'm putting him to the top. I've said all that I need to say about Mikkel Damsgaard. If you haven't already watched the video where I break down his game in a little bit more detail, I think you need to go and do that, because everyone that's watched it said it's been really good. But I think it really goes a little bit granular in terms of to why he's so good. But all you need to do is look at the stats with Mikkel Damsgaard. 7 assists this season, 98th percentile for that. Expected assisted goals, 98th percentile. Progressive passes, progressive carries, successful take-ons, tackles, blocks. He can do it all. And I think out of anyone, bar maybe Bryan Mbeumo and Yoane Wissa, this guy he should be in the Premier League team this season. And people need to kind of wake up. And they have started to do a little bit. But come down to the G-Tech and watch this guy play. Come down and watch him play, because you will not be disappointed. He has just exploded onto the scene this season. And I absolutely love the bloke. To have tied him down to a contract, a long-term contract as well, is fantastic business by the club. Because I think if we were to see Yoane Wissa, Bryan Mbeumo, Kevin Schade and Mikkel Damsgaard go in the same window, I think the other three could happen. They could happen. Bryan Mbeumo definitely will happen. To see all four of them go in the window would have been a situation where I would have probably been worried for the first time, I think. To lose four players of that calibre all in the same window would have been quite worrying. But Mikkel Damsgaard, to tie him down so that, you know, if interest comes in, be that in the summer or the season after, to tie him down to a big contract, is good business from the club, because we will demand a very, very, very high fee for him. And if he continues at the trajectory he's on at the moment, you know, the sky is the limit for Mikkel Damsgaard. I don't want to rave about him too much because I have done so much already. Ji-soo, again, I'm just going to have to put him straight into the not seen enough category. I think another one that might benefit from a loan. I have seen him play a few times. He looks very calm on the ball. He looks like everything you want a modern centre-half to be. But I've just not seen enough of him to make a kind of proper judgment on him yet. I think he came on against Brighton and didn't look out of sorts in any way, shape or form. But I think with the likes of Ethan Pinnock maybe returning to fitness in the next few weeks, and Kristoffer Ajer, he's probably still behind Ben Mee as well, who I'll talk about next. So I think he would probably benefit from a loan. I don't know if the club are looking to do that, because I know that they rate him quite highly. But again, I've said it so many times, we've got a lot of young players. Our average age is actually quite under the radar this season in terms of young squads. I think we have the third youngest squad in the league. And we've got a lot of players in here. Jaden Maghoma, Konak, Maghoma, Ji-soo, Yarmo. All of these players, they're all kind of ones. I think the transfer strategy in recent years for Brentford, and I think it kind of goes under the radar as well a little bit, because we're really, really patient. And you think of the players that haven't quite worked out for Brentford in recent years. I'm thinking of players like Shandon Baptiste and Frank Onyeka and players of that ilk. Obviously a different age profile to the players like Yarmo and to the players like Kim and Gustavo Nunes. But I think what the strategy has been recently for Brentford is get these players in now so that they can sustain us in the Premier League for the future. And we can develop them and maximise their potential. And if you're going to bank on someone maximising players' potential, I think Thomas Frank is the guy to do that. We've seen with the likes of Mbeumo, Wissa, Nathan Collins, Damsgaard, Keane Lewis-Potter, all these players. You've seen Thomas Frank's ability to get the best out of them over a period of time. And Ji-soo, Gustavo Nunes, they're all players of that ilk. And I think the strategy for Brentford has been, right, we've got these players who have got us into the Premier League, your Janelts, your Jensens, your Norgaards. Now we need to start building for the future. These are players that are going to keep us in the Premier League for the next 5 to 10 years or so. So yeah, Kim Ji-soo, I haven't seen enough of him to make a judgment. On to Ben Mee, I think. I don't want to put him in not... He might have to go not seen enough because he hasn't really played this season that much. He's made a few starts here and there. I don't even think of the game he's come on. He's looked like his legs have gone, which some people were suggesting maybe last season. I was definitely suggesting as well because I don't think he was as good in the season last year as he was in the season prior to that. But yeah, not seen enough of Ben Mee, to be honest, to make an assessment of him this season or to rate him this season. So I'm just going to have to stick him in that category. This category is the biggest one. No surprises there. Mark Flekken. Mark Flekken, where are we putting you? I'm going to put Mark Flekken in high performers. I think what I will say about Mark Flekken, right, is the drop-off from David Raya to any goalkeeper that we were going to pick up was always going to be steep. And obviously it's taken him a bit of time to kind of find his groove. We all think of that Man City performance last season where he saved about 1 million shots in the first half. And that was kind of a turning point for him. In terms of his overall play, the one area that I think he needs to improve is in the 1v1 situations. I think I mentioned it on the podcast potentially, but I think it's happened far too often this season where he's come out unnecessarily. And I should be referring to Craig on this because he's part of the goalkeepers union, but I think he comes out a little bit too fast sometimes. He jumps the gun and coming out, and then he makes that dinked finish so much easier. And I think that will definitely be something that attacking coaches from opposition teams will have targeted this season because we know that he's quick off his line and we know that he goes to ground fairly quickly. He spreads himself like this, but he often goes down to his knees, which is obviously what you're supposed to do in those situations. But I think he just comes off his line a bit needlessly sometimes, I want to say. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think, because I think his shot stopping overall in general has been okay this season. The areas I think he needs to improve on is those 1v1 situations I just talked about. His ability to command the box. I don't think he ever really looks too convincing coming out and gathering crosses. He often opts to punch. Fucking hell, I knew that was going to be hard to say. He often opts to punch the ball out rather than catch it. And I don't think he's ever looked too convincing in those circumstances. What I will say, and why I've put him in high performers, is that I think his versatility and his adaptation to this new style of play that Brentford have really kind of started to implement this season and Thomas Frank has started to implement this season, playing out from the back and being comfortable on the ball in situations where we are playing out from the back. A few passes go astray and there are some moments where my heart is in my mouth and I'm thinking, please just get rid of it. Passes into midfield sometimes don't work out, especially when you've got players under pressure like Janelt and Norgaard and Jensen who don't really want to receive the ball in those situations. I would probably say the only one who is actually comfortable to receive the ball in those situations and make the right decision would be Damsgaard, because he often draws fouls and he often has the ability to get past players in a 1v1 situation. Those are the areas where it does scare me sometimes. But I think by and large, his distribution this season has been really, really good. And I still do have reservations about Flekken, but I don't think that outweighs his big moments this season, and he has had big saves. And we've been quite happy to let opposition teams kind of pepper our goal with shots from inside and outside the box, whether they're provided that they're low quality chances. So I'm going to put him in high performers because of where he was and where he is now, and because he has shown a lot of bravery. I think that's what it is. I think he's shown a lot of bravery to come under the pressure that he did last season and to be so comfortable in situations where he's got players on him and he takes a lot of touches for a goalkeeper. I think he's in the 90th percentile for touches from a goalkeeper this season. To be that comfortable in those situations, I think is really promising for Mark Flekken. And like I said, the drop-off with David Raya was always going to be steep. We're never going to find a goalkeeper as good as him. But I'm going to put Mark Flekken in high performance. Let me know what you think. Valdimarsson, not seen enough of him, but I think he's going to be really, 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 really good for us going forward. I think maybe if we ever decide to move on Flekken, I don't think we've got a terrible backup in Valdimarsson at all. I think his performance at Brighton was really, really positive. Again, another one that's really comfortable in those situations when he receives the ball off the back four or from goal kicks and playing out short. he looks like one as well that is a bit more commanding of a 6-yard area. He looks like he's always willing to come out and stop crosses, etc. So yeah, one for the future again. And then I'm going to finish on Fabio Carvalho, and I'm going to look at his stats. And if you looked at these stats per 90, you'd think we're talking about someone who is a mainstay in the Brentford team. Progressive passes and progressive carries are very high. Tackles, interceptions and blocks, again, very, very high. I talked about in a full video that I did on Fabio Carvalho, which is on my channel now, about him being the missing piece in Brentford's puzzle. And I talked about his counter-pressing abilities and the way he presses and just nags at players, which I really, really love to see in the Wolves game and in the West Ham game as well. And it's not quite happened for Fabio Carvalho yet. Obviously, there was that whole Instagram thing with his dad. That didn't help anything either. And he wasn't good against Plymouth, but I want to caveat that by saying no one was good against Plymouth. And there were so many changes to the team. I really want to see more of Fabio Carvalho. I don't think we should be writing him off at this stage of his Brentford career. I don't have to say it again, but you've seen with the likes of Lewis-Potter, Damsgaard, etc. It takes a bit of time for players to bed in. And with the prowess and the attacking capabilities that Mikkel Damsgaard has shown in that number 10 role this season, it was always going to be difficult for Fabio Carvalho to break into the team. And that will continue for Fabio Carvalho for the rest of the season, provided Mikkel Damsgaard stays at the levels that he's at. What I will say, and someone commented on my last video, he kind of said, I don't know why, but I feel like the presence of Thiago back in the team, whenever he comes back, I think Fabio Carvalho is going to be a big part of kind of unlocking Thiago. And for some weird reason, I do agree. I don't know why. But I feel like the type of player that Carvalho is, he likes to receive balls in pockets, similar to Damsgaard. He likes to pick a pass. I think he dwells a little bit on the ball too much for me, in a similar way that Janelt can do sometimes. But I think as a facilitator for Bryan Mbeumo and Wissa and Thiago, I take it back to the Newcastle game, which I think is the best we've been all season. I think Carvalho in those attacking areas, just being a pest and being a nuisance and linking play with the forward line, I think was really positive to see. Whether we see Damsgaard and Carvalho in the same team, I'm not sure is realistic. But, I mean, if you look at his stats, to be that kind of 8 in midfield with a Norgaard or a Damsgaard, I don't think Thomas Frank will ever do that. But if you want, the things that you want from your 8 is to be good going forward and going back. And he's good in the tackles, he's good in interceptions, he's good in blocks, and he's good with his progressive passes and carries. So I don't think that will happen. I would love to see it happen, to kind of go hell for leather against one of these lesser teams in the games we've got coming up, of a midfield 3 of Norgaard, Carvalho and Damsgaard. I'm not sure that will happen, but I think I'm going to have to put him into the need to see more category, because we have seen him enough for him to warrant being in the category above not seen enough, but we've not seen sustained good performances, and that's by and large down to the fact that he's not had the amount of minutes, and he's coming on in the 70th and the 80th minute to kind of make an impact on games. He's not had a run of games where he's started. And yeah, I think we probably need to see a little bit more of him going forward. But that just about wraps things up for this video, rating every Brentford player's season so far. Look at the amount of players in not seen enough. Obviously, some of those aren't down to injury. Some of them are just down to game time. But I think if there was ever an indication as to the extent of the injury problems that we have had in the last 2 seasons, it's probably this image right here. Standout performers, I think Damsgaard and Mbeumo, Wissa, Collins are all the main 4. I think KLP probably has a shout to be in there as well, as does Christian Norgaard. But yeah, let me know if you agree, because I think these tier lists, it's kind of easy to make like a snap judgment on players, but I'm trying to, I've used some of the stats to kind of help my assessment a little bit. But I think there might be a little bit of debate in the comments. So let me know what you think of the tier list. Let me know if you agree, who should be higher, who should be lower, all that kind of stuff. Drop it in the comments, subscribe to the channel. Let's hope for 3 points on Sunday. I'll be there, which is great because I've not been to enough away games this season, or home games, because I live up north now. But yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to an away game on Sunday. And let's hope for 3 points, because it would be just a great way to kind of start this second half of the season where I think we can be pushing a little bit higher up the table. But yeah, like I said, subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment down below, and I'll see you on the next one.